For millennia, humans have gazed up at the stars, wondering if we're truly alone in this vast universe. But what if not only do extraterrestrials exist, but they've been covertly studying us in the most unethical ways imaginable? From abductees recounting unexplained anal probes to widespread reports of alien harvesting human genetics, we're diving headfirst into the most chilling first-hand accounts of people who claim their bodies and minds were experimented on by malicious beings not of this world. Brace yourself for a descent into cosmic horror far more terrifying than any sci-fi flick.
With Dulce Base. Some whistleblowers have claimed that Dulce Base, a supposed underground facility in New Mexico, is involved in genetic experiments, including the creation of human-alien hybrids. The origin of the Dulce Base conspiracy theory began back in the 80s when UFO researcher Paul Benowitz claimed he had intercepted electronic communications between alien beings and the US government. Benowitz's reports included mention of this base. One of the most prominent claims associated with Dulce Base involves the creation of human-alien hybrids. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that extraterrestrial beings collaborate with the government at Dulce Base to conduct genetic experiments, resulting in the development of hybrids that possess a combo of human and alien traits. These hybrids are often portrayed as part of a secret agenda aimed at enhancing human capabilities and serving other unknown purposes. Next up, we have the Young-hae Chi theory. Dr. Young-hae Chi, an instructor in Korean at Oxford's Oriental Institute, made some interesting statements a few years back. Alien abductions have been reported for years. It's always been a mystery as to why they occur. Are they experimenting on us, implanting us with unknown alien devices? Well, according to this instructor, these supposed abductions aren't malicious in nature. They have more to do with alien beings attempting to overcome climate change. In a 2012 lecture, Dr. Chi discussed how a highly advanced alien species had already made contact with the people of Earth, interbreeding with us after these abductions, attempting to form a race of hybrids to colonize the planet. He talked about how the rise in alien abductions seemed to coincide with major problems arising on Earth, like the invention of nuclear weapons and the increasing changes in climate, and that the aliens' belief is that a more intelligent hybrid species would fare better at protecting the planet. He went on to talk about it being a human's job to not only protect the planet for our own good, but to prove the aliens wrong and their assumption of superiority. At our number 8 spot, we have the friendship case. The friendship case refers to a series of alleged contact experiences between humans and extraterrestrial beings that occurred in Italy between the 1950s and 60s. The encounters were reported by a group of individuals who had been contacted by a highly advanced alien species who claimed to have established peaceful and cooperative relationships with them. The story goes that a number of face-to-face meetings and telepathic communications happened between the contactees and the aliens. These encounters reportedly took place in rural areas away from the public eye, and the humans were shown alien bases on Earth, as well as other highly advanced scientific and spiritual knowledge being shared with them. According to the contactees, these alien beings were all about the importance of peace and unity and ecological balance. The friendship case gained attention in the UFO community because of the detailed accounts and the consistency of these accounts amongst multiple witnesses. Some folks have speculated that during these peaceful interactions, some of these folks may have gotten a little handsy with their new space friends, resulting in some alien-human hybrids. Number 7, the Antonio Villas-Boas abduction. In 1957, a Brazilian farmer by the name of Antonio Villas-Boas reported one of the strangest alien abduction stories in UFO history. He claimed that on the night of October 15th, he was working in his family's fields when he saw this bright red star-like object in the sky. This object, according to Villas-Boas, descended and eventually landed, revealing itself to be a strange egg-shaped craft. From the craft emerged humanoid creatures wearing gray overalls and helmets. These beings abducted him, taking him aboard their craft. He described the aliens as around 5 feet tall, with small blue eyes and white hair. He claimed that they took samples of his blood, conducted medical examinations, and then led him into a room where he was introduced to a naked humanoid female. Oh boy. By the sounds of his description, they sound like attractive aliens too. Round, small, beady eyes, white hair. I mean, come on. According to Antonio, though, this one actually was pretty attractive, and apparently they proceeded to have a bizarre encounter. Afterwards, he was released, and the craft ascended back into the sky, leaving him alone and confused in the field. They didn't even buy him a drink. He later reported the incident to his family, who would have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that awkward conversation. I would not tell my family about that. That is something I would maybe tell a couple friends about, but not my mom and dad. Eventually, the story reached the Brazilian military and local authorities, and his account drew a lot of attention from the media and UFO researchers. There are some terrifying alien abduction stories. Take Travis Walton's, for example, where he was experimented on his crazy ways. Gotta say, though, as creepy as this would have been, not the worst thing that could happen. At least, I don't know, at least for me, alright? I don't know. It's not every day you get to, anyway. Let's move on. Next on the list, we have the Dr. David M. Jacobs theory. Jacobs taught history at Temple University. He also spent 35 years interviewing people who claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrials. First, he was a complete skeptic, but the more people he interviewed, the more he started to notice just how similar these accounts were. Despite coming from people who had seemingly no contact with one another, what he came to believe is that according to him, these abductions are being carried out by extraterrestrials in order to create human-alien hybrids, in order to colonize the planet, and that they're amongst us as we speak. Now, this is pretty outlandish. I haven't talked to as many people as this guy has about their first-hand alien abduction stories, though, so who really knows? But from where I stand, this is pretty hard to believe. What do you all think, though? Let us know in the comments. And at number 5, we have another David story, David Huggins. Huggins is an artist with most of his work depicting extraterrestrial beings. For him, these aren't pieces of fantastical work, though. They are depictions of his first-hand accounts with alien abductions, which he claims to have had a lot of. His odd experiences with aliens began when he was just 8 years old, and it persisted as he grew up. Perhaps his strangest story is how he met an alien named Crescent, who, according to him, was actually a hybrid. And the story goes that Huggins did a lot more than hugging with this strange entity. Yes, his first time was with a human-alien hybrid. He also claims to have had over 50 children with her who visited him along with Crescent. They're also accompanied by several of your classic gray aliens and insectoid type beings who are their leaders. All sounds pretty legit to me. Honestly, whether any of this is true or not, whether it's just a big hoax he's concocted for fun, or if he actually believes what he says, he seems to be living his best life, making some pretty cool art out of it as well, so I'm into it. Check some of the paintings out. They're kind of creepy, but I don't know, interesting. Next on the list, we have Simon Parkes. Simon Parkes is a British politician and self-proclaimed alien abductee who has gained attention for his interesting claims about his experiences with extraterrestrial beings. He claims to have been contacted by a 9-foot-tall green alien who claimed to be his true mother when he was a baby. According to Parkes, his mother, who he refers to as the Green Lady, is a mantid extraterrestrial, a type of alien that supposedly resembles a praying mantis. Parkes claims that his encounters with extraterrestrial beings began in his childhood. He says that these experiences continued into adulthood, including interactions with the Green Lady, aka his mom. He describes his relationship with his alien mother as complex, involving telepathic communication and a sense of connection that goes beyond human understanding. Parkes has shared his experiences in interviews, radio shows, and conferences with the UFO and conspiracy theory communities, but he was also quoted saying, "For many people who don't experience it, it's very hard to accept. We are taught to only see and believe what we can touch, but it's acceptable to believe in religion. It's a personal matter and it doesn't affect my work. I'm more interested in fixing someone's leaking roof or potholes. People don't want me to talk about aliens." Number 3, Linda Moulton Howe. Linda Moulton Howe is a prominent American investigative journalist, author, and ufologist known for her research on unidentified flying objects and alleged extraterrestrial encounters. She's conducted a ton of interviews with people who claim to be alien abductees or had contact with alien beings, including human-alien hybrids. Throughout her career, Howe has explored various abduction stories where individuals have reported encounters with human-alien hybrids. She's gathered testimonies, investigated the narratives of these alleged abductees. Her interviews often include detailed descriptions of these hybrid beings, accounts of genetic experiments, encounters with advanced technologies. These accounts typically involve claims of reproductive experiments, where abductees report being subjected to procedures that imply the creation of human-alien hybrid offspring. Next on the list we have the strange case of Jeffrey Lash. Jeffrey Lash was a mysterious guy who gained attention in 2015 after his death in Los Angeles, California. Lash was found dead in his car, and authorities discovered a whackload of weapons, ammunition, and cash in his home. What made this case even stranger, though, was the claim made by his fiancée, Catherine Nebron, that Lash was a human-alien hybrid. According to Nebron, Lash had told her that he was a hybrid with extraterrestrial origins, part human and part alien. He claimed that he was sent to Earth on a mission and possessed special powers as a result of this hybrid nature. Nebron believed Lash's story and thought he was a secret government agent involved in covert operations. She also claimed that Lash had instructed her not to contact authorities after his death because it would jeopardize their mission. Nebron's story about Lash being a human-alien hybrid definitely got some media attention, and the case became discussed in the UFO and conspiracy theory realm. Lash's background and the sources of his wealth are also still bit murky. Finally, we have the Betty and Barney Hill abduction. In September of 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, an American couple, claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrial beings in rural New Hampshire. According to their account, while driving late at night, they observed a bright light in the sky that seemed to follow their car. The light eventually descended, and Barney stopped the car to get a closer look. He reported seeing humanoid figures inside a craft. Panicked, the Hills fled the scene, but later realized they had lost a significant amount of time. Over time and through hypnosis, the couple began to recall fragments of their experience. They described being taken aboard a UFO where they were subjected to medical examinations. The beings they encountered were described as short, with gray skin, large eyes, and slits for mouths, your classic grays. Regarding the theory of hybrid experiments, some ufologists have speculated that the Hills abduction might have involved reproductive experiments. This theory also suggests that the aliens might have conducted genetic hybridization experiments on the couple, resulting in the possible creation of human-alien hybrids. Anyway, this case became one of the first widely publicized alien abduction stories in the United States, and it's definitely one of the biggest and well-known ones.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot, we have wolves. Okay, this is a story that reflects the first time I heard about astral projection, my immediate fear and worry I had about it. Not returning to your body when you want. They start off the story by writing that their experience started off normally. They flew through their bedroom window and there was a man in their backyard drinking a beer by a fire pit. The storyteller joins them for a drink, they talk like old friends, there were some other entities, but everything was just good vibes. Then they wrote, quote, "All of a sudden I see 3 wolves come in from the backyard with strange freaky looking masks, and they say, 'Do you all want to play a game?' As soon as they said that, I said hell no to myself and quickly went to snap back to my body. They then explained that despite every other projection experience they've had being able to return directly towards their body whenever they wanted, this time it was different. They were back in their body, but they couldn't wake up. They couldn't move. They then explained that once they were finally able to wake up fully, they saw little dark spots and felt like they weren't fully back from the astral plane into the physical one. Now, the next time they went to project, the wolves were still in the backyard waiting to see if they were coming out again, so they probably smartfully decided against it. In our number 9 spot today, we have 11 Days. This is a story that comes from a Reddit user, and the short of it is really summed up well in the caption, quote, "I accidentally had an astral projection that lasted 11 full days in my mind." Okay, we're off to quite the start. Basically, this person starts off by explaining that this isn't the first time they've accidentally astral projected. Like the other day I accidentally slipped and fell on ice. I don't know how people are out here accidentally having an out-of-body experience, but I guess some people just have more interesting lives than me. So basically this projection starts out with this person being in a cemetery. They didn't have a body and instead they were just floating around. Then a sort of guardian spirit appeared and told them that they had a job they needed to do. They then spent 3 days digging in a cave and ended up digging a skeleton out of the ground, and once that was dug up, then they were no longer floating around and they suddenly had a body. From then on, this person and the spirit went walking through the forest having long conversations about the person's life, and the spirit told them what would later happen to them in their life and answered a bunch of questions the person had for them. The final moment of the projection was when, on the last day, they arrived at a waterfall. The spirit allowed the person to play in the beautiful area for 3 hours and remarked how it was sad that they couldn't stay. After this, the spirit told them it was time to go and they woke up again. They end off their story by saying that they weren't able to see the spirit's face, and while he told this person his name, they couldn't remember it as soon as they woke up. This left them with a distinct impression that they weren't supposed to know or remember these things. In our number 8 spot today we have Breathe. This story is one that the poster called an odd experience, but I'm not gonna lie, when I read it, it was the one single story that got me kind of intrigued into the idea of projection. I don't think I'm gonna try it anytime soon, but I'll admit, it sounded kind of inviting. They wrote, quote, "So I was laying in bed last night and decided I wanted to try an astral project. I was just laying there and kinda came up with my own meditation technique when something kinda strange but really stimulating happened. Both my body and mind were still awake, so I don't know if I call this was me about to astral project or what. Suddenly my body felt really light but heavy at the same time. Also, it was like a new energy that I've never felt. I've also never breathed better in my life. So I'm asking if anyone knows what this was. I mean, I definitely can't say what this was, but it sounds kinda cool. There's just something about the idea of being able to breathe better that I want to experience. Can anybody tell me if that's normal to astral projection? Maybe that's what's gonna get me into it." In our number 7 spot today we have The Beginner. This is an astral projection story that I guess shows an experience that is fairly common for beginners. They wrote about how they began with having sleep paralysis. They wrote, quote, "Wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. I know it's all hallucinations. I didn't see anything, but it sounded like there was something scratching at my window. I closed my eyes and floated upwards. Again, I closed my eyes but could still see me passing stuff, but eventually I was in a black place. So I opened my eyes as an experiment and boom, back in my body. This happened before when I attempted an astral projection out of a lucid dream. Same deal. So it appears as though they are capable of the projection but are just having trouble seeing. This probably isn't the most wild story on this list, but it is still quite interesting to see how people have different experiences and that sometimes it can be based on your experience level. In our number 6 spot today we have The Child. This story is about a very strange astral projection experience someone had. They wrote, quote, "I was having normal lucid dreams all over the place and I came back home right over my body and could see myself and the blanket I was sleeping under. Right as I began watching myself sleep, I felt something bite me. And in the dream, I lifted up my blanket and a small child crawled out and I told it to get the heck out and it ran out the front door. I then woke up in real life. Weirdest AP of my life. Just had to share it here." They then go on to ask Reddit if anyone else has ever been touched or hurt while astral projecting and had it actually hurt in their physical body. This seems like a super terrifying experience, but I also think bizarre is the perfect word for it as well. I definitely don't think the person this happened to was expecting it. I honestly don't know much about astral projection, so I wonder what this all could mean. In our number 5 spot today we have The Fall. This story is about someone who had a negative astral projection experience, but they said it was still a fairly light-hearted one, which is always good. They wrote about how they went to bed early, so they tried some meditation to help them as they wanted to either lucid dream or astral project. I find this so funny because I absolutely hate dreams. I think sleep should be peaceful. I don't want to be thinking about stuff. I want to be left alone. Any day I wake up and can't remember my dreams from the night before is a great morning for me. So maybe I don't understand the desire, but I still think it's cool. They then go on to say that after this, once they had fallen asleep, they woke up every 2 hours, and at one point they felt like they were awake but that their body was still asleep. They then tried to roll out of bed / out of their body and it worked, but maybe a little too well. Their projection self fell out of bed and hurt their hip, and it actually physically hurt them, which in the end returned them to their body. They end up saying it's no hard feelings, something that they just kind of laughed off. It was just surprising and kinda silly. In our number 4 spot today, we have the sudden projection. This Reddit story starts off with the person explaining that normally when doing some sort of astral projection work, it takes them about an hour or so to build up the vibrations that lead them to the breakthrough. It takes time for them and isn't really something that happens suddenly. They then go on to explain that the night prior to their posting, they were just trying to head off to sleep when all of a sudden they saw brightness behind their eyelids and felt vibrations throughout their whole body. They wrote, quote, "I felt spinning and weightless almost immediately after. Meanwhile, that brightness was a pure fuzzy bright white light with a grayish flickering circle in the middle of my sight, which appeared to have, for lack of a better word, lightning strikes all over the place. That circle with the lightnings or cracks started rotating very fast, and 2 even brighter spots appeared to the left and right of it, and I felt accelerating. They then leaned into the feeling and kept accelerating until what they described as breaking through the circle and a typical, quote, sonic boom sound. After this, their destination slowly started appearing to them, but it was slowly loading, almost like a video game, and it was black and white or grayscale. This was sadly the end of what they can remember from their sudden, accidental astral projection. In our number 3 spot today, we have the smile. This is a story that comes from someone who marked this as a negative astral projection experience. They wrote, quote, "About 30 minutes ago I decided to try astral projection again since I hadn't done it in a long time, but had a very non-pleasant experience. I went about the usual methods, simply entering a meditative state. Before I had assumed it didn't work, so I opened my eyes, and I was trapped in my body. I tried to lift myself, but to no avail. For some reason, I felt myself smiling widely, almost like my mouth was stuck that way, and despite my best efforts, I could not change its position. I began to hear a woman's whisper, and I would hear familiar instrumentals to songs. I felt like something was trying to enter me, like it was going through my nose, so I demanded it to leave, and it did. I went to check my phone, but it wouldn't work. For some reason, I had 2, but I do not own 2. Honestly, I don't even know where to start. This sounds absolutely terrifying, but also the most random collection of things. Some of the people responding to this story suggested that perhaps it was sleep paralysis, but there are also people discussing how the presence felt might have been some part of their consciousness that they had previously tucked away. In our number 2 spot today, we have the shockwave. This story is about a negative experience someone had, and they were posting it in the hopes of finding someone who could give them a little guidance as they were feeling really unsure about the entire thing. They wrote, quote, "I was going through different eras full of beautiful sounds and ended up in complete darkness. There was a pinpoint of light, tiny. I pulled away as I feared it. As I pulled back to reality, it shocked my entire body. I convulsed. I was awake, but my consciousness was not with me. Every time I tried to move, I got vertigo, laid back down, and my body made me go back. I saw the light again. Boom, shocked my body again. I jumped. My heart raced as I was terrified. I was going 1,000 miles an hour or faster. I fought it and pulled myself out, zapped again once more. I was able to stay awake at this point, but I was done at the point with no desire to go back. Is this normal? What are your experiences? Personally, this entire list is about stuff I have never experienced at all, so it's tough for me to say what's normal and what's not. If you're more familiar, maybe you can let us all know down in the comments. This sounds thrilling and terrifying, but is it a typical experience? In our number 1 spot today, we have the entity. Honestly, I am getting surprised at how many people somehow accidentally astral project. This is another one of those stories, and they wrote, quote, "I've been curious about astral projection on and off for years now, but never fully committed. I've had a few accidental lucid dreams too, but I never got the full hang of it. This morning I woke up, scrolled on the phone for a bit, then fell back asleep, but I felt like I was in a sleep paralysis, but in a different room, which was strange, so I thought maybe I could try it and see where I am. My body started feeling weightless, like as if I were flying, but I couldn't see anything but this blank wall that resembles the wall in my room, but it's blank. The walls in my room all have decorations and posters. I started seeing a human figure in the wall that started smiling at me, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It felt like it was saying the words, 'fall' to me, and it just kept saying it angrily. Then my body started feeling like it was actually falling, but I was still trapped in my bed. My blanket felt heavier. The only thing I could do was to breathe and just try practicing meditation, hoping I would calm down and get out. In this space I was in, I felt like I was able to slowly scoot out of the blanket, then I woke up. That sounds absolutely terrifying. I can't even imagine. I know this was accidental, but that definitely would have been enough for me to never project again. I want in my body experiences only after that.
Starting off this countdown, we have Leah Haley. In 1990, a woman named Leah Haley was randomly abducted by aliens. She remembers being on a spacecraft in a round room surrounded by bright lights. When she woke up, she found herself lying on her back on an examination table. Weird alien-type figures surrounded her. Later, she decided to undergo hypnosis to try and remember more information about her abduction. And that's when she realized that the military might have had something to do with this. She also started to remember fellow abductees who she later would meet in real life. When Leah started to say that the military was involved in her abduction, she was actually abducted by members of the US military and interrogated. They apparently told her not to tell anyone or else they would kill her. Then over the years, she was offered jobs randomly by total strangers for positions at nearby military bases. So she believes that she was chosen by the military for a reason. Although the military threatened her in 1992, she published a book titled Lost Was the Key, and it's all about her alien abduction experience. Coming in at number 9, we have Myrna Hansen. In 1980, a mother named Myrna Hansen and her 6-year-old son Sean were headed home from Oklahoma when they approached a pasture. That's when all of a sudden they saw a beam shoot down from the sky and drag cows up into the air. When the UFO realized that Hansen and her son witnessed this, they abducted them. Through hypnosis, she was able to remember being taken to a deep underground military base. In fact, she was able to describe its location in great detail, to the point where members of the Air Force office started following her and her son around. Clearly, they were scared that she was onto them. Moving on to number 8, we have the member of the military. So in 1982, a man whose name was concealed for protection purposes was stationed on a military base in New Brunswick. Let's just call him Steven. So one night, Steven's friend and girlfriend left the base to go watch Tron in theaters. An hour later, they were back already. Their car had been smashed. Apparently, they were driving along a stretch of the highway to the movies when they saw a bunch of strange lights coming over a hill. A bunch of cars pulled over to check out the lights, including this dude and his girlfriend. That's when they saw a large disc with flashing lights fly up into the sky. Everyone ran back to get into their car and to drive away. As they were driving away, the craft crashed into the side of some cars, including these guys. A few days later, men in black showed up at the base looking for Steven and his friend. They told them that they better keep their mouths shut and to never tell anyone if they wanted to keep their military careers. Moving on to number 7, we have Robert Richardson. In 1967 in Ohio, Robert Richardson collided with a UFO while driving. However, after impact, the object disappeared without a trace. The only thing they left behind was a small lump of metal from their craft. A week later, he was visited by 2 men in black suits who told him to cough up the piece of metal he collected from the scene of the crash, which was hella sketchy because number 1, how did they know about the accident? And number 2, how did they know that he picked up this piece of metal? Richardson said that he gave the metal to the authorities for testing. The men told him if he was lying, they would kill his wife. Thankfully, he never heard from these men again. In our 6th spot, we have the abductee named Linda. One day, a woman named Linda Napolitano woke up floating mid-air above her bed. She looked around and saw some strange figures by her bed watching her. The next thing she remembers is being on board a craft where these figures were experimenting on her. Some of them looked like aliens, others were humans. Eventually, Linda decided to come forward about her experience and share it with the public. But upon doing so, 2 men kidnapped and interrogated her multiple times. This led her to believe that her abductions were either planned by the government, which makes sense as to why she saw both alien figures and human figures, or the military knows that aliens are real and are trying to learn more about them through the abductees. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with Melinda Leslie. Melinda Leslie from Orange County, California, leads a support group for alien abductees. More than 36 of her attendees say that they have been taken aboard an alien spacecraft and then later have been re-abducted by apparent military personnel and then subjected to physical examinations and interrogations. She herself has been a victim of this. She remembers humans in a flying triangle abducting her and taking her to an underground testing facility. There, a number of men in hazmat suits ran extensive tests on her. Eventually, she was abducted a second time, this time by a red-haired military captain who told her to tell him everything she knew about aliens. Coming in at number 4, we have the Roswell UFO. Roswell, New Mexico is famous for their UFO sightings. This is the hotspot for aliens, apparently. Or maybe it's because the military has a secret underground alien base there. Well, in 1947, a rancher named W.W. Mac Brazel said he found wreckage on his big plot of land. In fact, during that time, there were a number of UFO sightings, so the rancher thought that the wreckage was from a UFO crash. So he brought that material to the sheriff, who brought it to an officer from the US Army Air Force. Later, the US Army announced that what the rancher found was a flying disc. But the following day, the US military quickly backtracked. And they were like, no, it's not a UFO. It's actually just, debris from a weather balloon. Then, years later in 1994, they admitted that the weather balloon story was completely bogus. Now, this isn't exactly an alien abduction story, but it's a real story of the military caught lying and covering up their tracks. Moving on to number 3, we have the cornfield. This next story comes from a man who grew up on a cornfield. Their name was never released due to privacy reasons, but for our sake, let's just call him Bob. So one night, Bob saw something fly down from the sky and hover right above their farm. It was shaped like a rectangle and it was glowing light. Then it left as fast as it came. The next day, Bob and his family were greeted by 2 men in black suits with dark sunglasses. They said they needed to inspect the farm because there was a supposed natural gas leak. It was very strange because mostly everything on the farm was run by solar energy. Alas, the men were from the government, so Bob was like, okay, your authority, you know best, knock your socks off. The men then went out to the area where the UFO had been the night prior. Now, Bob did tell the men what he had seen. The 2 men said that if he ever repeated that, he was going to be arrested for endangering people. Like, what is going on, and why is the military so sus? In our second spot, we have the test subject. Ever since Caitlin was younger, she remembers being abducted by aliens. At first, she thought she just had a wild imagination as a kid or was a vivid dreamer. That was until she was abducted again when she was an adult. She remembers being taken from her bed by weird men, and then waking up on an examination table surrounded by bright lights. She could not move or scream. She knew she had been drugged. The next thing she remembers is feeling something really hot on her face. The men around her were doing something to her face. Months later, she decided to share her story with the world. And immediately upon doing so, she was visited by 2 strange men who told her she better tell the press everything she was saying was made up, or else she would pay the consequences. Fearing for her life, Caitlin refused to talk about her story to anyone ever again, and declined any follow-up interviews. And in our number 1 spot today, we have Kendall Folk. Kendall is another woman who has been abducted a number of times throughout her life. At first, she thought these abductions were by real aliens. Later, she was able to debunk her own abductions and realize the truth. Kendall believes that she was targeted by the military due to her mental health issues. This makes her an easy target in their eyes because, sadly, people will find it harder to validate her claims. She remembers during one abduction, she was taken from her home in a UFO craft. Later, she was able to remember that it was a car that pulled into her driveway, not a UFO. She remembers standing in her driveway and seeing this alien get out of the car and come towards her. Now she remembers how weird this alien was. It walked very robotic. And she believes that that's because it was in fact a robot. The military used this so that Kendall would think it was a real alien abduction. They later her and brought her back to a facility where tests were done on her. This is absolutely wild. Is it true?
Number 10, the chimpanzee human, also referred to as humanzees, which is fun to say. Look, here are the facts, people. We were very close to chimpanzees, DNA-wise. Around 98% of our DNA is shared with these hairy fellows. Back in the 1920s, we got closer than ever. A humanzee was not just a fantasy. Soviet biologist Ilya Ivanov inseminated female chimps with human DNA, but it didn't work. Or did it? Things got questionable when a chimp named Oliver hit the scene in the 70s. Yeah, he was walking like a human, which we've never really seen before. He was referred to as the missing link because of his appearance and the way you would act. He was previously a performance animal. He was a show chimp, so not a hybrid, but many viewed these experiments as immoral back in the day. Which is, yeah, I agree. Also, I remember seeing chimps in family movies, I'm pretty sure. Remember those movies growing up where chimpanzees were like snowboarding or playing hockey? Most Extreme Primate, that was it. That's where we're at, chimpanzees doing barrel rolls and hockey stops. My friends, we're already there. I think we're already at the Planet of the Apes terrifying point. We're screwed if one of these experiments works, that's all I'm saying. Number 9, human cow eggs. Okay, we had a few giggles talking about chimps. Time to get into the real scary science. Back in 2008, hybrid research was being done. Human-animal hybrid research, obviously. The whole idea was to find a cure for Parkinson's disease. I like these projects because we're moving forward, at least. We're not just doing it because we're like, let's see if we can bring dinosaurs back. We're trying to find a solution. Otherwise, we don't need to be poking around cows. Nobody needs 3 bowls of cereal before gym class, okay? There's other ways to wake up in the morning. Let's just leave cows alone for like a bit, maybe? Scientists used the nucleus of a cow egg. They took it out and replaced that nucleus with the human and skin cells. And then in a little time, the egg can develop and turn into a blastocyst, aka a cloned embryo. And there we have stem cells for said science. Again, this is a lovely step, but how far do we go here with DNA mixing? How much DNA are we gonna mix before we're like, stop? Things could go south. For example, just like the number 8, Kunga. Perhaps the earliest example of human-animal hybrid testing. Scientists recently learned about this donkey hybrid that roamed ancient Mesopotamia. This was a time even before horses arrived, so they had to do something. Large Kungas would pull wagons, and smaller ones would help pulling plows and smaller loads. These little guys were the talk of the town. Imagine a hybrid animal before horses. No wonder they were a status symbol back then. 4,000 years ago, they were given as gifts for weddings. Nice, yummy. Oh, I wonder what this one is. It's definitely a kunga. It's gotta be a kunga. After so long, scientists are finally able to figure out what exactly a kunga was a hybrid of. It was a female donkey and a male Syrian wild ass. Yeah, it's crazy what you can still learn from ancient animal bones from thousands of years ago. Science is incredible. It was more amazing how involved this hybrid was in Mesopotamian culture. Do we bring back the kunga? I don't know. Kinda seems like we could use them. Number 7, woolly mammoth. It was announced less than a year ago that a team of scientists and entrepreneurs over at a new biosciences and genetics company called Colossal, they got the funding finally for quite this project. They're planning to bring the woolly mammoth back to life. Yep. Instead of just paying off student loans, they're like, how about we bring a mammoth back? Let's just see if we can do that. That'll solve some problems. The last mammoth alive was around 7,500 years ago. But what if we had these hairy Goliaths back again today? The Siberian tundra, thousands of years ago, was once full of these guys, but climate change began to slow them down. Also, humans needing food definitely didn't help. These guys provided warmth and, well, obviously look at them. Lots of food, so they died off quite quick. Genetics company Colossal raised over $15 million to try and bring this thing back to life. And they're on the way, they're doing it right now. That's happening as we speak. A mammoth is being born. They're using the CRISPR gene editing tool, which is a fun tool, I guess. Elephants are still kicking around and their genomes, combined with the preserved mammoth DNA, is the magic trick. So if you see mammoths trending on Twitter in 4 to 6 years, well, you know why. There's not another Ice Age movie. It's definitely just a real mammoth. Number 6, Pyrenean ibex. The Pyrenean ibex also went extinct a long time ago. This was much sooner though than mammoths. This was around 2000. The last one was a female named Celia, and a falling tree sadly ended her life. Of all the ways to go, really? Come on, man, that's sad. It was a subspecies of the Spanish ibex. They were native to the Pyrenees Mountains on the border of Spain and France. Back in the medieval ages, their population was reduced drastically to an endangered level because of, knights and swords and bows equals lunch, right? So the numbers dipped more than fair. There's armies to feed. But in 2009, science was ready for the Pyrenean ibex to return. It was successfully cloned and brought back from extinction for 7 whole minutes. Yeah, 7 minutes in heaven, or 7 minutes out of heaven, rather. DNA from the last living lady was implanted in the womb of a domestic goat. Yeah, a little goat hybrid. Lung complications are why the clone sadly didn't last, but we had a hybrid medieval animal for 7 minutes. We're getting close. Number 5, the super cow. Moo, but with a lot of O's. Introducing the super cow. Okay, start your day off with some super milk, and then have a super stomach ache. your super pants. My god, I can't do milk anymore. Only in Belgium. Back in the 1800s, scientists and farmers brought together native cattle and short horn cattle to make this hybrid animal. After that, they would literally just pick the biggest cows of the bunch and then have them breed together, and then so on and so forth. These cows are officially called Belgian Blues, but I will continue to call them super cows. Thank you very much, because that sounds amazing. I can't even look at them. God, they're disturbing. They look like bodybuilders. Just, it makes no sense. How does, what? Where does that come from? Let's move on. Number 4. Tasmanian tiger. Once native to Australia, the Tasmanian tiger, also known as the thylacine, was a massive carnivorous marsupial that went extinct around the 1930s, also quite recently. Major factors here are, as you guessed what I said earlier, climate change, hunting, and its genetic diversity wasn't all too great. All those combined, it's just no chance. It's sad on one hand because these beautiful creatures disappeared so recently, but it's also recent enough that we have a shot at bringing them back to life. Hey, what's up? Hey, you've been asleep. Hi. Hybrid science. There we go. Let's get mixing. Yeah, imagine looking outside and seeing this thing on your front yard. Are we ready for this? I think we're ready. Let's jazz up some trails by introducing these guys. Specimens of the Tasmanian tiger still remain preserved in jars. No idea who has them or why, but we'll move on from that. Thank God for those jars. So we have Tasmanian tiger genes present, so scientists can now insert them into a mouse fetus. They just combine fetus of a mouse and DNA. I do this a lot. This is how I'm gonna explain this to my kids and be like, hey, this is how the human life cycle works. You just do this with your hands a lot, and then you're alive. They're still lacking the full DNA to successfully recreate it, but they're close. A recent $5 million donation to the University of Melbourne earlier this year allowed for researchers to create a research lab. So, yep, they're actually getting very close. They're like making the lab to make this thing. I'm like, ooh, they're gonna do it. Number 3, the great razor auk. Yes, once thriving in colonies off North Atlantic coasts, the great auk would grow up to 30 inches long and its wings would only be used to swim. They were cute, but quite defenseless, these little guys. Around the 1500s, European fishermen discovered this perfect area for hunting and or eating, and it just happened to be where most of these great auks were hanging out. So they disappeared fast. By 1950, the last 2 known specimens were hunted by a single fisherman on Eldey Island, just off the coast of Iceland. And that was it. They were gone. Until now. Nice. Scientists plan on using genetic information extracted from their fossils or preserved organs. Remember those guys in jars and the organs that I talked about? Yep. Classic organs in jars. Always coming in handy. They plan on editing their DNA into the closest living species, which is now the razor-billed auk. So now we get a nice fun hybrid again. The organization Revive and Restore is behind the wheel on this one, so keep it up. Keep bringing things back from extinction, just not humans. I don't want zombies, please. Number 2, lions. Back in the 80s in the Chatbir Zoo in India, they started an experimental program where they would breed together domestic lions and African lions in the hopes that they would just be introduced to the wild and help with the dwindling population of wild lions in India. On paper, that's a great idea. That's a step forward. We love those. But the zoo found 2 African lions that were being used in a circus and was like, you know what? We're gonna save you guys. Get out of the circus. Then they brought them in to breed with their 2 Asiatic lions. So, I mean, from circus to science, it's like, you're still sorry. When the cubs were born, it was clear this was already a mistake from the get-go. The cubs already had severely weak back legs, they were having trouble walking as they got older, their immune system started to fail, and by 2000 they had bred more than 70 of these hybrid lions. So they finally decided to stop the program and all the males were given vasectomies in order to stop any further reproduction. There are luckily laws that prohibited them from killing these animals, so at this point we're just waiting for them to die naturally, which sucks, but it's definitely better. And finally, number 1, the dodo bird. Dodo birds were once big and beautiful. These flightless ground nesting birds once filled the islands of Mauritius located in the Indian Ocean. They were awesome. We've seen them in Ice Age. They're all funny and big and furry. They had massive talons. They were gray and blue. They were gorgeous, and best part of all, they didn't have any natural predator until, us. Until we came around. Around 1507, the island was discovered by Portuguese sailors, and, well, the rest is history, and or lunch. They were the easiest bird to hunt, hence the phrase dead as a dodo. They weren't just loved by sailors either, they were not 100% to blame here. Monkeys, rats, pigs, any animal basically that made its way to the island easily had their eggs for lunch, so it didn't take long for the dodo bird population to be completely wiped out. The last dodo was hunted in 1681, but could it be? Could we bring back said dodo birds? Scientists found an extremely well-preserved dodo skeleton back in 2007, so we may have a chance at picking some DNA apart there and bringing them back to life via hybrid science. A research facility near Melbourne, Australia is currently trying to use pigeon genes to bring the bird back. I mean, yeah, I'm all for the idea of bringing an animal back to life. Scientifically, that's definitely a feat in itself, but how long before these things are on hot ones, like dodo chicken wings? Now that I've said it, you kind of want one, right? Now you feel bad. There we go. Hit that thumbs up so we don't feel guilty in the future.
Number 10, astronaut sightings. Who better to trust about what's going on in space than people who have actually been to space before? That's right, numerous astronauts over the years have reported seeing things that they think might be UFOs. Buzz Aldrin was one of the astronauts aboard the Apollo 11, and during their journey they all reported seeing flying objects. Of course, space debris exists, and it could just be some metal junk that was adrift in space. But then why did they report that the objects appeared to be following them? When they thought that it might have just been a detached part of the rocket that was flying alongside them, they were informed that this piece was actually 6,000 miles away from them, and they definitely wouldn't have been able to see it from that far away. He also said that when they brought it up, they were briefed to not talk about what they had seen out in space. Well, the government can try all they want to cover things up, but eventually word always gets out. Number 9, paintings. Now let's go well beyond spaceships and astronauts and move into the far more distant past, because alien sightings certainly aren't a new thing and seem to have been around for centuries. One piece of evidence that people often cite is a painting titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino. It was painted in the 15th century by Dominic Ghirlandaio and appears to depict a UFO flying around in the background, its shape matching up with people's frequent depictions of flying saucers as being alien spacecrafts. There also appear to be beams of light coming out from the bottom of the ship, and this has led people to believe that it is unmistakably an alien craft and not just something else placed up in the sky. And if you take a look at it, it does seem hard to believe that it could be anything else, as what other dark object would make sense to be floating in the sky like that? If you have any ideas, let me know what else you think it might be. Number 8, the Tic Tac UFO. Back in 2004 on the coast of California, a US Navy pilot named David Fravor reported seeing something strange. In fact, he reported seeing something that was, quote, something not from this earth. They were about 60 to 100 miles off the coast of California, and he was leading a strike fighter squadron through some exercises when the incident occurred. He said that he saw a tic-tac shaped vessel flying through the air at incredible speeds, but it wasn't just him who saw it. It was also reported by another flight crew who actually followed after the craft and even filmed it. While the footage was originally kept classified, it's now been made available to the public. The case was then published by the New York Times after the Pentagon acknowledged its Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program, which is actually the Pentagon's own 21st century study of UFO sightings. Number 7, wow! Exclamation point. The Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, otherwise known as SETI, is a group that, well, searches for extraterrestrial intelligence. In 1977, a large radio telescope outside of Ohio was scanning the skies on behalf of SETI when they picked up a signal that lasted for 72 seconds. The printouts of readings often included low numbers, which was typically just the background noise that the telescope picked up. But then a scientist noticed that there was a sudden string of letters as well as larger numbers. The letters went all the way up to U, which indicated a signal 30 times stronger than the typical background noise. Upon seeing these consecutive letters, which would represent a very strong signal and something potentially alien, he circled them and wrote the word wow followed by an exclamation point in bright red pen. To this day, we've never really seen anything else like it, and the extraordinary readout has yet to ever be duplicated. Number 6, Viking Mars. Now let's get into some more sciencey factual stuff. When people think of aliens, the term that might often come to mind is Martians, being attributed specifically to aliens that reside on the planet of Mars. NASA has sent a lot of things out there, and one expedition was referred to as Viking, them sending out little robots to take readings of the planet. One test that they performed was done on the soil, mixing soil with radioactive carbon-labeled nutrients to see if they would produce radioactive methane gas, this being a chemical sign of life on other planets. And it did, the test coming back with a positive result and finding organic molecules. But NASA just brushed it off, I guess, because they said that the other experiments didn't end up with the same results, so they just said it was a false positive. But one of the original scientists and others who have analyzed the data stand by their discovery, saying that the other experiments had just been ill-equipped for performing the tests and finding the same results. Number 5, Martian fossil. Let's hear from NASA again, this event taking place in 1996 when they announced that they had found a Martian fossil. They said that they had found fossilized microbes within a lump of Martian rock, a meteorite that is theorized to have been blasted off the planet around 15 15 million years ago, before finally winding up in Antarctica, where it was discovered 12 years prior in 1984. They analyzed it a lot, of course, and found organic molecules as well as small bits of the mineral known as magnetite, which can sometimes be found in Earth bacteria. Researchers also said that under an electron microscope they were able to see traces of nanobacteria. So it seems like evidence is continuing to stack up that other planets are, or used to be, capable of sustaining life. And with a universe as infinitely large as ours, it's hard to say that it's impossible that life on other planets could ever exist. Number 4. The Super Hornet. Let's now take a look at another piece of evidence that came out following the Pentagon's acknowledgement of their Advanced Aviation Threat Identification Program. This took place back in 2015 on the East Coast and is another video of evidence discovered by the US Navy, this time by a FA-18 Super Hornet, a strike fighter that reaches speeds of up to 2,000 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast. The pilots see the unidentified object moving at incredibly high speeds over the water and they struggle to keep up, but are finally able to get a lock on it. When they do, they start cheering, and one even says, "What the F is that thing?" They continue to follow it and seem to be unable to figure out what it possibly could be. This is another piece of evidence that had to go through a declassification process before it could be released to the public. Makes you wonder what other video footage and potential signs of alien life the government might be hiding from us in a filing cabinet labeled classified. Number 3. Chicago O'Hare. In November 2006 in Chicago, Illinois, airline staff and pilots alike were shocked by what they had witnessed. Multiple people reported seeing what they described as a flying saucer in the air. It was an overcast day and the UFO seemed to be just hovering over the Chicago O'Hare Airport terminal. They then described how it seemed to shoot up into the air incredibly quickly, so fast that it punched a hole through the cloud cover above it. The FAA, or Federal Aviation Administration, described it as simply being a strange weather phenomenon and they wouldn't be investigating it, so don't worry about it. Of course, that's what they want us to think. But so many people at once reporting seeing a flying saucer shooting through the clouds doesn't really sound like a weather phenomenon to me. One flight traffic control official said, "To fly 7 million light years to O'Hare and then have to turn around and go home because your gate was occupied is simply unacceptable." Number 2. SETI readings. Now let's go back to the SETI project again. If you've somehow already forgotten by now, that refers to the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Back in 2003, they were using a large telescope in Puerto Rico to re-examine around 200 sections of the sky that had all previously shown unexplained radio signals. All of the signals had disappeared except for one, which had actually become stronger. It came from a spot between the constellations Pisces and Aries where there aren't any known stars or planets. The signal was emitting the frequency for hydrogen, the most common element which both absorbs and emits energy. Some astronomers believing that this is the most likely element aliens might use to send a message to us for this reason. The signal from this spot in space has now been recorded a total of 3 times, and has left many people wondering if it is truly a signal coming from aliens. Number 1. The Phoenix Lights. On March 13th in 1997, an event took place that was referred to as Lights over Phoenix, or the Phoenix Lights phenomenon. On this day, hundreds of witnesses reported seeing otherworldly lights across Arizona, Nevada, and northern Mexico. There were 2 main events. The first being a giant V-shaped aircraft that had 5 lights on it, maybe thrusters, though it apparently didn't make any sound. Then later that night, there were a series of red and orange lights in the sky that didn't appear to move at all. And while air traffic control employees could see the lights in the sky, they couldn't see them on their radars. The governor of the state of Arizona at the time said, "I'm a pilot and I know just about every machine that flies. It was bigger than anything I've ever seen. It remains a great mystery." And it really does remain a mystery. To this day, nobody seems to have any real or solid explanation for what the large spacecraft and the lights might have been. It was said that it was a military flare drop, but this came after their original statement that they had no planes in the air. And even a recreation of the event didn't line up with what people had seen, flares flickering and burning out after only a few seconds. I have an explanation though. It was aliens.
Alright, we're gonna get right into the weeds here with Lazar's claims about flying saucers at Area 51. So when he claimed to have worked there, he said there were 9 alien aircrafts being held and studied at the base. In terms of what these alien crafts were being used for, More detail on that in a bit, but basically they were reverse engineering the alien technology. In terms of what these alien aircrafts looked like, Lazar described them as looking completely different from one another. Some of them he only got a quick glimpse of and were too far away to make out proper details, but a couple really stood out to him, and one he referred to as the Jello mold, describing it looking like, quote, your classic Jello mold with the ripples on the sides of it. One he saw looked more like a flat disc, and part of it was damaged. He figured maybe researchers had been maybe testing whether or not their weapons could penetrate it, or it could have just crashed or been shot down initially. And most of his research was happening in Area S4. But let's go to Hannah for more info on that.
Alright, thanks James. Unless you're living under a rock, I'm positive you have heard about Area 51, otherwise you probably wouldn't have clicked on this video. But do you know about Area S4? Well, neither did most people until Bob Lazar decided he was sick of the secrets and decided to tell the world. According to him, Area S4 is a secret base located in Nevada near its better known counterpart, Area 51. So, why the super secret base connected to an already pretty secret base? Well, aliens. Alien spaceships, alien intel, alien technology, antimatter reactors, and moscovium, also known as element 151. More on that later. But Area S4 was aggressively denied by the government, who even went so far as to say that Bob Lazar never worked at the Area 51 base in the first place. But here's the thing. At one time, they had also said that there was no Area 51 base, and that they weren't big brothering us either. So in this case, I'm thinking I might be inclined to believe Bob for this one.
Now, Bob Lazar also gave vivid descriptions of the technology that was used to gain access into S4, hand scanners. Now, hand scanning tech may not seem all that impressive to us these days, but keep in mind, he was working at Area 51, or claimed to, in the late 80s, so this was pretty advanced technology for the time. If this is true, you can only imagine some of the futuristic tech they could have over there now. According to Bob Lazar, the security system at the S4 facility involved a unique and advanced hand scanning process. When you'd come up to secure areas, you'd be required to undergo a biometric scan using a hand scanning device. Lazar described this device as a very sophisticated piece of tech that scanned the unique patterns and features of the hand to grant access. He'd place his hand on a scanning surface, and the device would analyze all the specific contours and lines on the hand. The security measure was part of the stringent protocols that were in place to control access to all the extraterrestrial technology housed at S4. But now, back to Hannah.
Next up, the Roswell crash. Now, while Bob Lazar was not the first person to discuss a UFO crash landing in Roswell, New Mexico, he is the first person who has also claimed to have worked on a secret government base to discuss it. So, what is the Roswell crash? Well, it's an event that took place in 1947. A local farmer discovered what appeared to be a flying saucer crash landed in his backyard. The military was pretty quick to collect the debris. Initially, they were brought to a nearby base, but soon it was leaked that the specimen was sent to other bases in Texas and Ohio for further testing, saying that what had actually landed on the farmer's land was nothing more than a weather balloon. So why did they send it to so many testing facilities? Okay, what's even weirder is that 50 years after the incident, the Air Force released a report claiming that the wreckage was actually part of an espionage mission. Bob Lazar claimed that the whole thing was a poorly planned cover-up, and that the strange events that took place in the area after the crash were due to the fact that what had actually been collected was nothing less than an alien spacecraft. Seems like a lot of lying going on from the government there. They keep changing their story. I'm sure in another 50 years they'll tell us what it actually was.
Alright, next up we have Bob Lazar's description of briefing documents. So we've already covered, and we'll talk more about the alien aircrafts seen at the facility, but what about their origin? Does anyone know where these things came from? Well, according to Lazar, the government did have quite a bit of information on these alien beings, and this info was shared with him and other workers in briefing documents. They were part of a briefing that was provided to personnel working on the classified projects at S4. Lazar described the briefing documents as these detailed manuscripts that covered this whole range of topics related to the alleged extraterrestrial presence. They contained info about the history of these alien beings, their technology, and the reasons for their interactions with Earth.
So, in the beginning, James did mention the 9 spacecrafts being examined in Area 51, but furthermore, over at Base S4, it appears, according to Lazar, that they were actually able to figure out exactly how one of the vessels runs. And apparently, it's on Moscovia, aka element 115, or 115. The element supposedly first became known in 2003 after it was synthesized by a team of Russian and American scientists at a joint institute for nuclear research in Russia, although Lazar claims to have seen the element at the S4 base in the 1980s. So, what is element 115? Well, it's a super heavy radioactive element by bombarding the atoms of element americium, 243 with the ions of calcium 48. Hopefully I pronounced those somewhat correctly. Obviously, I don't recommend trying this at home. As I said, the element is radioactive, and also you probably can't do it at home unless you have some kind of $1,000,000 lab stashed away in your basement. Anyways, I think that I do believe Lazar, because if anything's gonna power an alien spaceship, it's probably gonna be something heavy and radioactive. Back to you, James.
Now, aside from all the alien technology stuff and the inner workings of Area 51, there's another interesting story Bob Lazar has shared about his time working at the base, and that's that his phone needed to be tapped. The higher-ups needed to be able to listen in on Lazar's phone to help make sure he wasn't sharing any sensitive information over the phone, but also to help get a sense of his home life. Lazar wasn't allowed to share any info with anyone, of course, including his wife. She was completely in the dark about what he was doing day to day, and she began to think that he was having an affair. And then she started having an affair. The higher-ups at Area 51 knew this because they'd been listening in on his home phone, but Lazar had no idea. One day he came into work but was stopped from coming in. Then in the days that followed, he started noticing that he was being followed. He found out after the fact that they wanted to make sure Lazar wasn't going off the deep end due to marital problems, and that he'd be stable enough to continue his work at the base.
So, Lazar saw the base, and he saw the spacecraft, and he saw what powers it. And then, apparently, he saw military personnel reverse engineer it. Honestly, I don't know why they don't just release this information publicly. I mean, the Pentagon released a bunch of UFO footage, and we're supposed to believe that the best they can do is capture it on video? Like, isn't the United States supposed to have the most powerful military in the world or something? I'm just saying, it might make them look better, and smarter, and more capable if they just said, yeah, we found a spaceship, and it's ours now. But I guess you guys aren't here to listen to me rant about the pointlessness of gatekeeping UFOs. So, Lazar claims that by dissecting one of the vessels on Base S4, the government was able to figure out how to build one themselves. Not only that, but he was actually one of the engineers who helped them do it. He also claims that the team used anti-gravity and antimatter technology while crafting the ship, and he had a front row seat to its initial launch.
Thank you, Hannah, and now I'm going to talk more about that launch. So because they knew how these vessels ran, the logical next step was to try taking one for a spin. Lazar described being called out to observe an aerial test of the spacecraft that he'd been helping to work on, and personnel were communicating with someone in the craft who was going to be piloting it. He described the craft as being very quiet, almost completely silent. On initial takeoff, it emitted a blue glowing discharge, making kind of a hissing sound, but once in the air, it just hovered silently. Then the craft did some simple maneuvers, moving around left to right in the air, before it lightly landing back on the ground. Lazar was also told that because traffic in the surrounding area was apparently lowest on Wednesdays, that's when the more impressive flight tests took place. This is where they'd actually take the craft out and fly it higher over the test site and do more impressive maneuvers with it.
So, if Bob Lazar's claims turn out to be true, which they probably will, he will become one of the biggest United States whistleblowers to date, much like Edward Snowden, who revealed the magnitude of government surveillance back in May of 2013. But now that the UFO cat seems to be out of the bag, Lazar has begun to fear for his life. In an interview with 8 News Now, Lazar revealed that the only reason he chose to speak with the news channel was because he believed the government was after him, and he felt that he needed to be in the public eye to ensure his safety. This is the same reason that he claims to have produced his 2018 documentary Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers. It's a very direct name, straight to the point. I like it. Lazar claimed that unfavorable things had started happening in his life after revealing the secrets of S4, which he did because he believed that by withholding the information regarding the existence of UFOs and alien intelligence, while many people have backed Lazar's story, with some even claiming to have witnessed the events that took place on the base as well, no one has garnered the same amount of popularity and scrutiny as Lazar, who has had all his credentials wiped from online databases and has been condemned and deemed as a liar by the United States military, who claimed that not only has Lazar never set foot on the base S4, but also that S4 doesn't even exist. But again, the military is known to lie, so let me know in the comments who you believe.
Create a video using exactly this script. Want to see more videos like this one? Check out this video next. It's about megalodon attacks that will never make you want to swim in water again. Click the video now to find out more. See you in the next video.